paper is on the inevitable but not necessary struggle for spiritual maturity. From Isaiah 43, it says, "Fear not, for I have redeemed thee. I have called thee by thy name. Thou art mine. When thou passest through the waters, I will be with thee. When thou walkest through the fire, thou shalt not be burned, neither shall the flame kindle upon thee. For I am the Lord thy God, the Holy One of Israel." But what is this struggle? And what is this fire and this water? The journey toward spiritual maturity and the inevitable but unnecessary struggle inherent in it can best be understood by looking at where the inevitableness of the struggle comes from and what the not necessary or the healing aspects of the journey are. In the Bible, it is described that God said, "Let us make a firmament, and let us divide the waters which are below the firmament from the waters which are above the firmament." In metapsychiatry, we call the waters below the firmament, as Jan mentioned, the sea of mental garbage. Here, unenlightened man lives and struggles, appears to be born, gets sick, and dies. Here, man matures and struggles as a human person. Above the firmament, we find the ocean of love intelligence, divinely inspired ideas, pure wisdom, and love. This is the land where the living soul dwells and spiritual maturity reigns. Here, struggles are not necessary. The firmament itself is the dividing line that is not material but spiritual. It is a faculty of awareness that is awakened within us in the journey. This faculty, called spiritual discernment, makes it possible to be aware of the difference between reality and unreality, material appearance and invisible spiritual qualities, such as love, peace, beauty, humility, truth, and assurance. Before we study metapsychiatry, all we are aware of is the human existence, that is, the world as it appears to be. With the emergence of the firmament, we are lifted out of sense existence into soul existence. Sometimes this takes many years, but eventually we reach a point where this seeing is clearly established in consciousness, and we have the capacity to be aware of pure spiritual reality. At this time, we discover that we are living souls, incorporeal, non-dimensional spiritual beings. We behold, as it says on Having No Head by D.E. Harding, we behold our absolutely pure and luminous nature, which is our original face. We begin to reap a harvest of spiritual blessings. Life begins to improve in every direction. Healings occur, and we find that we respond to daily issues more lovingly and intelligently. The inevitable struggle in this process, Dr. Hora has called straddling the firmament. This is when the war between the spirit and the flesh emerges. Here, we are being drawn by the soul towards spiritual understanding, but we still have a vested interest in certain aspects of our human experience. In this phase of growth, we may think we are regressing. We experience a sense of turmoil and conflict. It is our interest in conflict. Our interest in spiritual life is still incomplete, and we are trying to straddle the fence by keeping a hold over our human life, clinging to the good and attempting to manage the bad. We have not yet learned that our task in this phase is to appreciate that which we already are. A description of this process of expanding our appreciation of spiritual life is again by D.E. Harding on Having No Head. It may help us understand this struggle better. Typically, at the beginning of our spiritual awakening, the fruits, such as love and joy, a new sense of freedom, insights, discoveries, there is a delight and a colorful crop of fruits, soon to be followed by a bare and wintry season. All seems lost, but in fact, much is gained. The difficult but essential lesson is now to acquire a taste for the plain truth and learn to rely on it. This is the realm we have known humanly as nothing, emptiness. And now we are finding that this void is something more. He goes on to say that one's total voidness and poverty, from which inexhaustible riches will flow at the proper time, and that the only rewards of seeing that stay with us during this phase is that beneath the troubled surface of life there is a colorless but deep peace. For many, this period is a miserable time. It's the dark night of the soul. No longer can we enjoy human pleasures or pursue the ways of the world, but neither can we commit ourselves fully to spiritual life and the plain truth. The healings that came in the beginning of the journey, as we opened ourselves up to the good of God, the enthusiasm, life getting better, these are the goodies, the goods, and they are being clung to. Here we are confusing the increased good of material life with the good of God, which is spiritual. That is, we keep looking for what we're going to get for ourselves rather than seeking to be here for God. We say, life should be better. I shouldn't have these problems. It is a difficult time where we have outgrown our human goals and ambitions and have not yet grown into spiritual maturity. Dr. Lindhorst, in a recent class, shared with us a Dutch proverb. This will bring to mind a hilarious session where we were all brought to count for our miseries. We are too old for a bib and too young for a napkin. Deep proverb, yes. In practical terms, he said, some of us may be going through financial difficulties. It may mean losing a troubled relationship or a friend or struggling with a physical problem. But gradually, we see that we have made it through the crisis with greater strength and understanding of God's grace. The essence of our being is, as the Zen Master Suzuki says, non-religious, devoid of emotion, and it comes to us as a cold scientific matter of factness. Now, this would have been unattractive to us in the beginning of the journey. Now we are able to appreciate the seeing of one's original face in all its homely plainness. That's from On Having No Head, that last. The seeing of one's original face in all its homely plainness. The word appreciate means to know the price, to grasp the worth, the quality or significance of, to judge with heightened perception or understanding, to be fully aware and recognize with gratitude. And that's from Webster's Dictionary, the definition of appreciation. In this bare and wintry season, this inevitable but not necessary struggle, our task is to expand the capacity to appreciate the living soul which we are. The soul increases in value in our perception. Until we are aware that this is the whole of our existence. Spiritual maturity is not a separate time or place in our life. It is the life of the living soul, eternal and timeless. It always has been and always will be. The soul goes through none of this turmoil. It is always in the presence of love intelligence. The soul knows no struggle. To say that the struggle for maturity is inevitable means here we are, we seem and find that we're in it. To say it is not necessary means that we identify with the soul that we are. And in that moment, the struggle is healed. And so are any seeming consequences of the ignorance that we've been involved in. One Zen master explains this when he says, moment by moment, we are created out of nothingness. A student once said, as going through this crisis, to Dr. Lindhorst said, "You mean if I can understand the meaning of this crisis and I can glimpse who I really am, a spiritual being, then I could be healed?" And the therapist said joyfully, "Yes. But then what will be left to learn? I'll be erased." And the therapist said, "Don't worry. Then you can work on the daily, mundane events of human experience." Everything in experiential life is driven by ego gratification, or the promise of it. The struggle we go through is the conflict of our interest between the peace and assurance of soul existence, which is not yet appreciated, and the striving for human good. Spiritual reality is reflected, just as a shadow is, into human experience. But this shadow is not the real good of God, which is infinite and unlimited. The potential for spiritual maturity is also reflected in the striving for human goals. From infancy on, we see evidence of just such a struggle. We are maturing physically, emotionally, psychologically, sexually, intellectually. And this maturing process begins in childhood and continues to work itself out symbolically in every aspect of human life, until such time that we recognize we must rise above the firmament to spiritual maturity. In the words of St. Augustine, "Thou hast formed us for thyself, and our hearts are restless till we find peace in thee." The struggle for human maturity is dualistic. It consists of conflicting fantasies about what life is, all of which promise the illusory ego self some satisfaction. One fantasy usually conforms to parental ideas about who we are and what our lives should be, while other fantasies are acquired later from our education and other human influences. The human idea of maturity is a composite, sort of a fashionable picture based on our sense of incompleteness and what every man or woman wants to be if they were to attain all that human life could offer, the good life par excellence. As children, the parental fantasy is foremost, but as soon as we get some inkling of who we are as this little human, we attempt to break free immediately. Here we find out what our identity is, and then we attempt to break free. And the ideas of the child, from these ideas of the child identity. In this, the separation individuation, which Charles spoke about, the child asserts his own sense of separateness from the breast or the parent. Really, it's the ideas of the parent. The good little girl wants to be the bad little girl. The bad little boy wants to be the good little boy. Children appear to be dependent on parents and struggle for independence. As we grow into adulthood, this same struggle can surface in other forms. We are vulnerable to this particularly in relationships to loved ones, a spouse, or even a boss. As one Zen student put it, we tend to turn every environment into our old hometown. That's from the Zen Environment by Marion Mountain. At a human level, we are asserting our sense of separateness from God until we run into an existential crisis. And then we can assert no more. Then we must return to the Father, as in the story of the prodigal son. For one woman, this conflict was reenacted in a struggle with the idea of being a woman as a homebody, a loving wife, a mother, being here for others. She was to find a strong man to lean on for her security or lament the absence of such an experience. This image was very much at odds with a more fashionable image, one of a mature, self-reliant, assertive professional woman that needs no dependencies on a man. It is interesting to note that both of these images are resented. We desire and resent the idea of a strong person to lean on. And we desire and resent the idea of being on our own. For men, there are similar fantasies to strive for. Again, one image conforms to parental and societal ideas. Being a loving husband, a father, a good provider, or a financial success. And the conflicting fantasy is sometimes the idea of freedom as license, not being tied down to anything, being the uncommon man riding off into the sunset. This may include ways of earning money that are very high in status or opportunistic with few responsibilities. Or it may include being a playboy with a new idea about relationships, which are casual but sensitive. Relationships with women that are casual but caring but casual. But soon, anyone who seeks happiness in material life soon finds that they're angry, they're resentful, and they're disappointed, no matter which way they have turned. Both fantasies are fantasies. Whatever it is that people seem to be getting out of experiential life is basically illusory. It's a fantasy. How often have we been elated about our lives, thinking everything is going so well, and a few hours later, the same life seems empty? It has all fallen through, just like that. The perspective of spiritual maturity reveals to us that there are no independent nor dependent people. There are no happy, thin, assertive men or women. Nor is anyone fulfilled or at peace with this human life. No one has good relationships. No one has a good sex life. No one is better or more important or richer than anyone else. No one is emotionally happy or well-adjusted or self-realized. There is no way, finally, once and for all, to get rid of our hang-ups, eat anything we want, and look great. But there is spiritual maturity. There is our real life above the firmament. Here, none of the material, dimensional promises of human existence pull us anymore. As Jesus said, "The prince of this world cometh, and find nothing in me." The prince being the seductive promises of the ways of the world. No satisfaction is to be found anywhere because there is no self to become satisfied. Although the struggle to mature, become independent, and gratify the ego gains very little when we have to face ultimate issues of life, we still do devote much energy to it. We struggle against failure, trying to conform to one fantasy or another, hoping to find some peace with this self. And ultimately, we must come to see that our hang-ups, they just do not exist. They are not us. And we can stop wrestling right now with them. We must forgive ourselves at this point for insufficient spiritual maturity. Inevitably, we must come to know what does exist, what really is. These seeming conditions of human existence, they are temporary, and as Jan mentioned this morning in his paper, transitory states that we go through on our way to knowing ourselves as living souls. And we will continue, unfortunately, to straddle the firmament until we have seen through this veil of material life that it is not real, what is it that will move us off the fence? What do you think? Does anyone have an idea? What moves us off that fence? Yes, a little more suffering. Often that's what does it. But these struggles, like the dark night of the soul, are not signs of failures. And from the Zen environment, it says, in Mountain says, as the untutored worldling is apt to suppose, they are not signs of failure, but they are signs of growth, the creaking of rheumatic joints, foretelling their eventual mobility. Did you just see that? We are all joint participants in the quest for spiritual maturity. You like that pun? It wasn't meant to be a pun, I just got it. We're all creaking into mobility here. The healings and spiritual blessings of any one of us blesses each of us. At first, we have a tendency to compare and measure ourselves against another's growth, thinking that there is a there. In a recent paper on envy and gratitude, Charles Gorgie says, man does not manufacture his own spiritual progress. He cannot take credit for it, and it is not something that he can personally achieve or own. Spiritual progress is the grace of God manifesting itself in each individual living soul. The unfolding of our spiritual understanding and maturation comes to us through grace. As Dr. Hora has said, it is dependent on the passion with which we face this gift of God and the intensity of devotion. In the process of maturing, this tendency to compare or envy another is healed. After all, as Charles says, no one can possibly be more spiritual than anyone else. We are not becoming more spiritual. We are realizing and appreciating what we already are. Any time that we see envy in our thoughts, we can be sure that we are not envying something spiritual. Not spiritual qualities, but something else. We can envy someone what they possess, and we do not. Whereas spiritual qualities and spiritual maturity cannot be acquired, envied, or personally possessed. Those individuals who have realized a deep understanding of themselves as living souls are spiritually mature. They are able to behold everyone and everything in the context of God. And Charles has pointed out that this is not something to envy. It is best that we see it as a revelation to us, because it reveals to us what we already are, what we are moving toward. This is a blessing to us and an inspiration. Here we can give up admiring this and be grateful for Dr. Hora, for Anne, for Jan, for all of those in the room and elsewhere that have struggled and been healed. Our existence is spiritual. We are not autonomous selves, but living souls. This soul draws us toward spiritual maturity in the direction of realizing non-dimensional reality and substance. And the blessings of this maturity are available to us all, and they are a gift freely given. These blessings are awareness of ourselves and others as living souls, forever expanding in awareness of divine reality. Harmonious prospering, joint participation in the good of God rather than striving to have good relationships. Glowing, which occurs as our consciousness is filled with love, intelligence, and gratitude. Spontaneously, we glow with joy, an inner quiet joy which comes from the awareness of God's infinite good. Spiritual beauty, Glowing makes us very beautiful, regardless of any seeming physical structure, and our beauty deepens as the cultivation of love in consciousness expands. Uniqueness. We each manifest the qualities of God in our individually unique way, free from all measurement and comparing. Freedom, which is not license, but a liberation which comes from knowing our true identity. Free from all human influences, parental fantasies, and expectations. This is the liberation to be what God created us to be. And finally, spiritual love, which is the love of being loving. An objectless, non-conditional love with no strings attached. In this love, we find our fulfillment and our spiritual maturity.
So interesting how each paper fit the other like a glove. And they all seem to complement each other. I think, Leslie, you got also an answer to your question this morning.
Yes.
Right. Yes, in gratitude for the revelation. I see there's something revealed that you already are. Are you familiar with the paper of Charles, Envy and Gratitude? He explains. Yes. All right, are there any questions here? Bill is ready with the microphone. There is Danny.
You stand up. First of all, I'd like to say that I can't remember a time when we've had so many beautiful papers at one time. Every single one of them just have been very relevant and helpful to me. My question is about the firmament. I've had a problem with understanding what the firmament is. I think it's been clarified a little bit. What I'd like to know is metapsychiatry, the crossing point over from below the firmament to above the firmament.
The understanding of the principles of metapsychiatry would be, but we can participate in spiritual truth without crossing over the firmament. In other words, we can attempt to make the spiritual journey fit our ego for quite a while. But the understanding of the truth of our being is the awakening of spiritual awareness, spiritual reality in our consciousness. And that is the dividing line. Once we awaken, then we cannot go back wholly into the world and say there is nothing else. We have now awakened to spiritual reality, even a glimpse. And now we must continue to cross over, like you say.
Okay, thank you.
I would like clarification on an idea I had recently about the three temptations of Jesus. Was it the significance of the first two seemed to be a response to a temptation in a way of mastering, or the interest was in conflict. And then the third one, when he said, "Get thee behind me," there was no longer an interest in conflict, and then it ended. Is that significant in that area? Does that have any particular meaning, or is there another meaning to the three temptations?
Who are you addressing specifically?
Anybody that wants to answer.
He asked me if I'd rather he answered it.
Do we all know the story of the three temptations of Jesus, right? Yes. How about what?
I think he said cover the high points.
The high point. Well, of course, that was a crucial phase in Jesus' development, spiritual realization. And it occurred after he spent 40 days fasting and in meditation. His consciousness was reaching beyond the firmament, and it's usually when the devil pays us a visit. So there are described three temptations. The first temptation was for ego gratification. The devil said, look here, you've been fasting now for 40 days, you must be starved. And you're such a great one, you know. Why don't you just make a magical move and turn this rock into bread and satisfy your hunger? You see? The idea is that if you are moving up beyond the firmament, you will have all sorts of magical powers. So it was a great temptation for Jesus to do that, and probably he could have done it too. He supposedly turned water into wine. He could have turned a rock into bread and gratify himself with food. So that was the first temptation, self-gratification. The second temptation was, the devil says to him, look, you're a great guy, and the Bible says that if you will be close to God, then he will send angels to you, and they will lift you up in their hands, lest thou dash thy foot against a stone, right? So he says, why don't you climb up on this high steeple and throw yourself down and show the folks who are watching that God will send his angels and catch you. And then you will make a big impression. So we could classify this temptation as the temptation towards self-confirmatory exhibitionism. So he refused to gratify himself, and he refused to show off, to confirm himself. And the final temptation was, if you bow yourself down to me, I will give you power over the whole world. What more can one ask, right? Again, here was the temptation for power, and dealt with the issue. We all have a sort of a desire to have power to heal, power to influence, power to preach, power to teach. Power is a very tempting thing for human beings. So he refused that also. He said, nothing doing, and get thee behind me, Satan. So he has overcome these three temptations: self-gratification, self-confirmatory ideation, and a hunger for power. And we all, this is relevant, you know, whatever Jesus went through is relevant to all of us. On our way towards liberation, enlightenment, we all are tempted at all points. And one way or another, sooner or later, we all have to overcome these temptations. Thank you.
God didn't create a devil or evil, but seems like even in that what you were just explaining, and I feel sometimes if maybe other person feel like in me who force somehow to do things what with my clear mind I wouldn't do. So is it any devil or evil? I never seen, but who is what is that kind of thing which even Jesus has to go through and face? Is it the self-confirmatory things, but is it any devil or evil? Because God didn't create it.
Right.
Didn't know.
It says in the Bible that man was created upright, but he sought out many inventions. And it's the many inventions that we think have reality and happiness in them that are the seductions, the provocations, the three prongs of the devil's pitchfork. Provocation, seduction, and intimidation. Those are the things that tempt us. They come in that, they're distractions. They come in that form. And it's helpful in the teen group. We dealt with some of Jesus's life, and particularly this being tempted. And the teenagers were asked, how are we tempted? How are we tempted to show off? How are we tempted to gratify ourselves? And how are we tempted for power? And they also had a problem with this idea of evil, of the devil. And sometimes in the Bible it says, the whisperer cometh. See, a clear idea comes, and the whisperer cometh. And it's calculative thinking, leaning on one's own inventions. That's my understanding of it.
Or is it could be sometimes what I feel, it's like my mother acts out from me, or I'm just, without thinking, I'm reacting what I was planned.
A preconceived thought of who you should be and what your life should be. Is that what you mean, Vera?
Yeah. So maybe that's that strong feeling, what I feel, like I have to act because that's how I saw it.
Or is your mother going with her thoughts?
Yeah.
The fantasy of our notions of what we should be is...
So the mother is the devil.
No. I'm one of those, so I hope not.
There ought to be a law against mother.
I just wanted to tell you that Jay said in-laws. But Dr. Hora, would you clarify a little further the concept that we've addressed today about being here for God? That a person can't be here, and here isn't time or space. So would you address that koan a little further, please?
You are stuck on the word here. Is that what it is?
The whole notion. How do you do that?
How do you do it? Very carefully.
I initially seemed to have this idea of I'm supposed to do something that God wants me to do, whether I want to or not. But I think
well, you're formulating your thoughts in operational terms. Being here for God is not an operation. It is a devotion. You don't do it. You devote your wholehearted attention to it. And that then brings about this ideal mode of being in the world. As clear as mud?
yeah, that's
You said something about time and space. What do you have in mind?
the idea of here. I seem to remember on one of the tapes he said that it wasn't a place in space, but an attitude, not an attitude, but a mode of being, I think.
Yes.
I was confused on that.
Being here for God means existing, living for God, being for God. It's not a place, it's not a time, it is just a designation that there is something, there is an existence, there is a life which has a purpose of glorifying God by manifesting his qualities.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
In the back there, Bill, Jean.
Hi. I would like you to address the dread of nothingness and the role it plays in the maturation process, spiritual maturation. Is it another one of those necessary or not necessary but inevitable?
Highly philosophical.
Or another philosophical?
Well, Fern addressed that, if you remember, in her paper very nicely, as the situation that follows the initial maybe elation when we discover truth, followed by what she called a wintry season, or a void and an emptiness, the void of human gratification. You remember that, Jean? Were you there? So that she referred to that situation in a very practical way.
There is a French song which goes something like this. I'm not going to sing it. If you go away, if you leave me, there is nothing. It's a dread of nothingness, right? When we are to part with certain cherished notions or possessions or pursuits or passions, there looms up a dread of life without it, and that's the dread of nothingness.
The quote that I used, Jean, was that one's total voidness and poverty from which inexhaustible riches will flow at the proper time. We have such a tendency to think of what we have and what we are materially, dimensionally. And it's so foreign to us to think of our substance as not a thing, but an open space where God's presence is ever expanding. It's revealing. In us, it expands. We become more and more transparent.
Even less than space,
Non-dimensional.
because space also is dimensional. So you become even less than that.
Maybe we can have a new verb, transpanding. Our awareness is transpanding. You had any further questions?
Well,
turn it up.
I have experienced this dread of nothingness. And I guess I'm back to where I was yesterday as far as the reward, what it is that I guess it's the wisdom that pulls us through it. But it's so often that you don't want to feel that dread. I mean, you don't want to go through that, so you back away from it. But you need to go through it, essentially, is what you're saying, to understand that we are a place.
Maybe you are tempted by the power to avoid it. You'd like the power to avoid the whole thing.
That could very well be.
That's another seduction. I'm gonna get a glimpse of the truth, and then I can prevent everything from happening to me.
Yeah. Yeah.
It came to mind that I think sometimes in the beginning we have the idea that getting understanding of God, the spiritual path is going to free us from anxiety. And anxiety is very uncomfortable, so we'd all like to be as free as possible, as soon as possible. But actually, my discovery is that what happens first is that it enables me to tolerate anxiety. Because until it can be tolerated, the thoughts that are manifesting in it can't be uncovered. If I can't bear to feel that way, then I can't bear to look at what's making me or what shows up in the feeling, and therefore I never look at it. Then it's repression or whatever these forces are. And so it's been my observation that the expansion of my awareness of there being something else enables me to go through times of great anxiety in the confidence that whatever's there can be looked at, can be understood, and can be healed. And also that in the confidence that it's really a big nothing anyway. Anxiety always pretends that it must be something terrible if I'm this anxious about it. But we understand more and more that all of these are nothing, and then we're able to move on beyond that.
I certainly can relate to the gentleman back here about the fear of this dreaded nothingness. Because growing up and in this metaphysical, in the Bible it says you have to clean out the house of the devils, but you better fill it with something positive or the devils would come back. So what I have experienced is I'm afraid I don't know what to fill it up with. To get, okay, I got rid of the negative feeling, but what is positive at this point when I don't know what it is I have to fill it up? So there's a fear that might come back, in this positive and negative approach, because sometimes you don't know. I don't. So I think there is an anxiety and maybe a little fear with that.
I can hear your question.
Okay.
It was more a comment than a question. You were commenting, right?
No, I really feel like that I would like some clarification on how do you fill this house up that you just had gotten rid of the devils? In other words, that's an analogy, but what do you fill it with?
You know the answer? Yes, you have some.
No.
Well, again, we are caught up on linguistic inadequacies. Yes, Charles?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I was just thinking that in Jan's group last Thursday, he gave what I found to be a very helpful answer to this question. And he pointed out that it is possible to be grateful for spiritual good, for the spiritual good of God, even before you reach the point where you are able to realize it. You can still cultivate a gratitude, and as you study more and more, you are exposed to the idea that, yes, it is there, it is really substance, and our anxiety comes from judging by the appearance of separateness from God. But by being grateful for this good, even before it is fully real to us, is the path of ultimately reaching that realization. And in the group, Jan had a very nice phrase for it, which he called glowing in the dark.
You said what?
No, I never said that.
No, I think Christy came up with that. She had an experience of realizing she could glow in the dark in the midst of chaos.
I very much appreciated Anne's comment, and it reminded me of last summer I read an article about a lady who went to the Illinois State Fair, and she went to the outhouse, and in the process, the floorboard gave way. And she got up out of there and got $8,000. Now, to me, that's what spiritual maturity is.
Right on.
It's falling into it less and getting out of it quicker and getting money for it.
I think we'll take a break now. Be back in 10 minutes.